Hopefully I'm mic'd up. I got a little bit of the steam taken out of me because I was going to start with, if there's fewer lawyers, that's a good thing. That's the only thing I got out of that, only kidding. But on a serious note, I've been asked to talk about AI with regard to jobs, and I have something to say about that because I've been doing this stuff for a little bit of time. I will tell you, even at our own company, I always use a scale 1 to 5. 1 is an opinion, and 5 is sort of mathematical certainty. So I always like when I'm saying something to sort of give it a number because I don't pretend to be an expert in everything. The other thing I wanted to say is these guys are such great speakers. I'm not great at going to PowerPoint to this and that, so I'm going to be looking down a little bit, only because I want to be real thorough in my explanation, so I hope you don't find that distracting. I will say, and Robbie, it was great to listen to your talk. I've heard of automated insights, actually. That's funny. We have a patent on taking financial data and turning it into language. And I saw your names pop up a couple of times, but no lawsuit there or anything like that. But I'm glad you've been successful. And by the way, to the other speaker, I love to hear success stories in the triangle. Isn't it great? It's wonderful. Because we need those, right? It's definitely true. I've been an entrepreneur since I was a kid, and the truth is, so few people really make it, and I love to hear of people who do that because they put everything on the line, and the whole story around that. One thing, we started Sageworks in 1998, and I'm not going to say I'm a resident expert. Some of this stuff is blowing my mind because the field since we started has evolved, and I've been sort of caught in the muck of sort of where we live in this domain. But I will say, I think I have something to say about this because our original system was around taking financial statement numbers and converting those numbers through technology into language. And I've got some stuff to say about that. Sarah and I started, and we didn't wake up and say, we want to develop an AI system. And some of the acronyms or the terms have stayed the same, but technology, they always change, right? So we did a lot of research about machine learning and data warehousing and all this interesting stuff. But one thing I'll say for aspiring entrepreneurs, or just all of you really, is like really important with AI or anything is to understand the objective of what you're trying to achieve. AI is something, and I'll get into definitions in a second. We use technology to achieve something specific. Like I loved your example about taking tons of legal documents and just going through them because there's probably a lot of patterns in there. It's terrific. And again, we get rid of some lawyers. Sorry for the lawyers. But so that's really important. I remember being in the incubator at the First Flight Center. It feels like 100 years ago. It was 1998. A really smart guy over there. And he said, a lot of times in AI, and AI then was just like spaceship stuff, and I think it is even now, honestly. But he said, a lot of the problem is you're answering a question that nobody asks, So I was like, wow, that's really interesting, I'm going to try to figure that one out. But we were very specific on taking numbers and converting them to language. Of course, we had a market problem at that point because when we got out to market, I don't know if you know the history of our company, not a lot of people were super interested in that. We would go to the finance guys and say, hey, we've developed this great system. And Robbie, I don't know if you ran into this, but this great system that takes numbers, converts them to plain language using, it's really expert system technology, not AI. But the point is, that's what we would do. But the finance guys who understood numbers were like, why would you want to do that? So when we got out to market, we had to sort of find who the customer would be. Now, around AI generally, I'm going to really focus on jobs. And I'm very passionate around that because I've been in and around this field, and my background's mostly in finance. But when I get to the later part of the show, on the scale of 1 to 5, 1 being an opinion and 5 being fact, I'm going to be a lot in the 1 and 2 range, and I'll let you know. But the definition of AI itself, there's just so much coverage. There's just like lots of talk, AI, and we get these assumptions of what it even means. And I'm going to date myself, and I shouldn't do this, but I'm looking around the audience, and some of you remember this. In the late 60s, there was tremendous coverage around overpopulation. Does anybody remember that? The movie Soylent Green, and of course Hollywood gets into the act, and then it becomes real. You know what I mean? But the idea that within a certain amount of time, human population would grow so much that the world would end. I mean, it was just a massive issue. Not to say that overpopulation is not a problem, but in the late 60s, it was almost a given that because of overpopulation, the world would almost end. And I am not suggesting that AI correlates to that completely, but some of the coverage around it in the popular press reminds me of that. I mean, there's just like a lot of terms thrown around. And also you get into the act. I've noticed, I don't know if some of you have seen this trend, the more successful you get, the smarter you get. So you get successful and then people start attributing more IQ points to you than you really have. So Bill Gates has gotten into the act, and Elon Musk has gotten into the act. They've done a lot of writing, and super bright guys, super successful guys. But does that make them domain knowledge experts in everything? And I would say probably not. So my point is, I think that right now there's just a lot of stuff. For another good example would be when we started. I don't remember what the term was. Paul will remember this. We started as a SaaS computing company. We literally in 1998 we executed over the internet. I mean, everybody's doing that now, right? That's cloud computing, everything else. But that's where we started, because I started my company with the genius Sarah Torville. I said, "Where's my disk? Where's my disk for my software project?" She goes, "Oh no, no disk, no disk. We're gonna execute over the internet." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Because I was a finance person, And my point about that is that there's just a lot of talk, and there's a lot of ambiguity, and there's a lot of successful people addressing this stuff. There's examples that you gave that are great examples of where this field can be really applied super well. But with regard to jobs in particular, I have a couple of very specific things to say. Whenever I look at anything, I'm kind of a history geek, I mean, I try to put things in historical context. You cannot always use history as a predictor of the future, but you can learn from it. So for example, let's say someone's born in 1750 or 1800 or whatever, or let's say they're born in 1500. The relative difference in their lifestyle, let's take that, they're born in, say, 1800, versus the person who was born in 1865. Think about that, right? During the heart of the Industrial Revolution. So it's not to say that the standard of living did not increase from 1500 to 1800, but the rate of change was probably very much lower than the rate of change in the lifestyle of people who were born post-Civil War. Because after the Civil War, we have machines, and of course, Marx was right about a lot of things. People were worried about jobs. He was worried about jobs. He was worried about what would happen as machines took over for people. Now, what we really found is we found a lot of things. First of all, I would argue that despite all the great things that people like me claim to do, right, that the relative change today in technology is much less than between 1865 and 1920. You look at the phone and cars and whatever. It was just an amazing amount of change between that time, if you think about all the things that were invented. So entrepreneurs like me we take a lot of self-acclamation around, boy, we're in such an incredible age and we're doing so many unbelievable things. I would say that what we're doing today, even with the internet, is good, a lot of interesting stuff, but the relative change that we have now is probably less than at other certain periods of time. Now, I want to get into the specifics of that and get a little bit geeky, and actually maybe even wrong, but I'm going to talk a little bit about, so the point is, when I look at AI, machine learning, data warehousing, data science, and all these things that are cropping up around it, I want to take that and I want to overlay that across history. And what did we learn from this, okay? And what we learned was this during the time between 1865 onward, or even earlier actually, is that there were periods of unemployment. There's no question about it. There were periods of displacement. But actually, really, the unemployment rate has consistently kind of gone down as technology has gone up. I mean, now, will that continue? I don't know. No, that's number one, right? I don't know. I actually don't think so. But that's a number 1 out of 5. It's an opinion. But we have seen really no historical evidence for, as machines replace people, that job rates go down. We haven't seen it yet. Now, we may see it, and I could be wrong, and history does not always, history is not always the future, whatever. So let's walk through sort of an example of this, because that's the other thing. I'm sort of half tech. I'm not really a tech geek at all, honestly, but I'm definitely a financial sort of geek type guy. So let's say one person produces a car per month, and then we've got 5 people who are producing, say, 20 cars per month. And that's not through technology, but it's through the evolution or development of the assembly line, which, that's a new way of doing things. So we become more efficient. And let's say now we have one robot that builds a car in a week. Now, on the surface, you're going to have displacement in that industry. There's no question. And again, I'll keep this kind of tight. My argument to that would be, what happens then? And what has always happened? I tend to be a little bit idealistic too, by the way. So again, I could be wrong. But what happens then is we have lower cost of production, right? We have lower costs, cheaper prices, and people buy more what? Stuff. It's amazing. The amount of stuff in my basement and in my attic right now is like 100 times more than it was for my parents. We just buy more stuff. So as technology develops, and I believe this is going to be true of, in all of this stuff, although there will be temporary displacements in law. We see that now, by the way. We definitely see that in the legal field. That's happening right now. Don't go to law school, It's harder and harder to get a job as a lawyer. It's true. But here's what happens generally and historically. What happens is that prices go down, people buy more things, and it creates more opportunities. Now, it depends upon your worldview, and I think, I don't know, I think both sides have good arguments. But if you read Marx, or actually, read a lot of people, actually, if the economy were static and private companies made more money, their production costs are lower, they sell more, and they just sat on that money, then, maybe that would be bad for employment. But 2 things happen. Companies tend to want to make more money. So they take those profits. They don't usually sit on those profits. They invest. They invest in machinery. They invest in new things and new markets and that happens. And that's a very important dynamic. So we have seen that consistently over a very long period of time. The other things that we see, and we know, is that even though some industries are displaced, like, does anybody remember using travel agents? Do they still exist? I don't know, right? But they get displaced. Other new industries come in and other opportunities get created. I'm going to talk about something sensitive, and I'm probably going to end. I want to stay on my time limit here. Because this is kind of in our company, we call it the dead cat in the room, people don't want to talk about it. It's a very sensitive issue. What does this mean for Americans? What does this mean for people who maybe didn't go to college? What does it mean for people who have not had the advantages that a lot of you have had, right? It is not good, probably, right? I don't know whether that lasts a year. I don't know if it's 10 years. I hope it's not a generation. But what it means for those people, and it's sort of the thing that looms here. It looms here, right? Where you might have had 20 paralegals reviewing those 100 documents or whatever. Maybe we need one right now. But what it means in America, in our great country that has been incredibly adaptive, is that there's a group of people who have to be educated, and we have to do something for them to give them the tools to be part of this new economy. Because most people in this room don't have, I can't speak for everybody, but most people in this room don't have those disadvantages. I'm from a town in Milford, Connecticut. I grew up in, I don't know, in the South they call them mill towns. I don't know what they're called. Where I'm from, they're called factory towns. And I mean, literally, like 30% of the people in my town worked at Sikorsky Aircraft, the helicopters and everything. So You know, I mean, Sikorsky, where are they building helicopters now? They're not going to build them in the highest cost, or, you know, one of the higher labor cost states in the country. They're going to put them in other places. This is the reality. So I'm really torn about AI generally. I will not proclaim to be an expert on it. I will tell you that we started our company all around it. We really did. But I will tell you that I'm torn on it because the American economy has been very adaptive. Entrepreneurs are very adaptive. People want to do more. Businesses want to make more money. They want to invest more. And that creates a lot of opportunities. But there could be temporary displacement. I think we just need to address that, and that's a reality. And I do worry about that group of people. You know, I feel bad because there's always these labels we put on things. You know, there's always a label for something, but it's not just the industrial Midwest, right? But it's parts of North Carolina. It's actually a large part of Connecticut. 2/3 of Connecticut is agrarian. It's true. You go, or they're old mill towns or whatever. And I drive through there, and I'm like, wow, where do the jobs go? So we have a challenge as entrepreneurs to create more and more technology that is not going to stop. I cannot stop Robbie. I cannot stop people like me from developing technology. But I do think we have an education issue to help the people who are not as advantaged as a lot of the people are in this room. Now, this is not a political speech, but I would end on that because I don't want to come up here and say everything's going to be fine. Marx is completely wrong. There's not going to be any displacement. But over time, we have learned about our country that because of the entrepreneurs creating jobs, creating technology, they're innovating, that it creates more opportunity for all of us. It really is true. It's just been true for a long time. But again, I do worry about those temporary displacements. Am I allowed, I haven't been talking very long. This is really unusual for me. I have 3 minutes and 1 second left. I got the time clock here. But one thing I would say to you, I'm going to have a commercial break for 60 seconds or 59 seconds, is I will tell you one other thing that I'm concerned about. The rate of entrepreneurship in this country, just think about it. I'm 55. So when I got out of school, you weren't a misfit if you started a company. But my father worked in the same place for 43 years. He didn't get me at all. Poor guy. You mentioned your dad passing. My father's the date. He just didn't get me. He's like, you're going to do what? You got out of Duke and you're going to go start a business? Why don't you just go get a job, right? In our generation, it's become cool to start a company. It's like cooler. You're not cool, and I'm definitely not cool, but it's kind of a neat thing to do. I'm going to go start a company. That was not true in 1985. And yet, the rate of entrepreneurship in this company is going up or down. It's actually going down. Yeah. Would you believe that? We got Shark Tank now. We've got these wonderful, when I started Sageworks, we started in the incubator at the First Flight Center. And I felt blessed. It was only like $130 a month for a rent. And now that we've got We Too and Me Too Spaces and all this other stuff where I speak, it's unbelievably innovative, right? You would think the rate of entrepreneurship is going up, but it's actually going down. So I'm definitely concerned about workers, but we've gone from 15% of Americans owning part of a private company to 9% in the last 30 years. You wouldn't think that, would you? Because it's kind of become vogue. So something to think about too. So I love these conferences. By the way, I don't know, I left Durham. I scooted Durham in 1994. I've been in Cary. It's where all people from Connecticut are supposed to live, you know what I mean? But I left and I went to Cary. But congratulations on what has happened in Durham. Isn't it amazing? And this has been the last 10 years. This is not the last 30 years. It hasn't. I don't think the line of regression has been like this. It's been like that. So it's wonderful. But I do worry about those entrepreneurs because without them creating those jobs and those technologies, we're all in trouble. I hope it provides you some balanced perspective on jobs. The thing that worries me about is people, and I have 32 seconds left, the people, Bill Gates, great, super smart guy, Elon Musk is going to Mars, which just because he's going to Mars, I like him, by the way. Just for his vision, so he's doing something. But these are very intelligent people, but I worry about sometimes their historical knowledge ability of the American economy to adapt. So I would leave you with that. Maybe something a little more positive on a Friday, okay? Thanks very much, guys.